Thank you very much, everybody. As you all know, when it comes to security, especially to do with the schools, we found out, just like the rest of you, every time there's an incident or there's a school shooting, what you find is not only is there almost mass hysteria by the general public, by the community at large, by parents, but then the school district gets inundated with all manner of solutions or attempts at solutions. And so when, as a district, instead of just doing the scattergun part, the scattergun approach, and try and be reactive to everything, we quickly found out when it comes to resources, when it comes to how you need to look at things comprehensively, you have to do it in a very collaborative way, not only to save resources, but to do something that works. And I'll quickly start by basically telling you about our district. We are about the 31st largest school district in the country. We have about 83,000 students, 12,000 employees, but we cover a pretty wide area, about 1,200 square miles. We have overlapping jurisdictions, about 14 jurisdictions that include 2 counties, the city of Albuquerque, and several villages, 3 Indian pueblos, and other unincorporated areas. So on the map up on the screen, you can see where we cover. We are in Bernalillo County, which is the most populated county in the state of New Mexico. About 56% of the population of New Mexico resides in Bernalillo and southern Sandoval County. We have 88 elementary schools, 40,000 students. They cover about 6 million square feet. We have 27 middle schools and 2 K-8 schools. That's about 18,000 students, about 3.8 million square feet. And we also have 13 comprehensive high schools, about 23,000 students, 5 million square feet. We also have what is called schools of choice, and there's 16 schools of choice, approximately 1,800 students, 392,000 square feet. And then within our district, we also have about 50 charter schools. 25 of those are chartered by the district, and the rest are chartered by the state of New Mexico. It's a quirk of law in New Mexico. You have to have the authorizer be either the district or the state. Now, when we talk about security, we found out really quickly that we can talk about all the hardware, we can talk about all the toys, we can talk about, the fencing, the, gunshot detection, cameras and all that. But we want to make it very clear, and that's how we have it in our presentation, that the family emotional health of the families and counseling and that as perspective of it is what is really important. So we'd like to talk at the very beginning about family and emotional health and about that, what that means, and how all our hardware, all our resources, all our collaboration is all based on family and emotional health. I'll let Dr. Muir talk about that and what she does for the district.
So good afternoon. I'm Chris Muir. I am the executive director of a very large division in APS. Within my division, there are probably about at any given time, 90 programs that are happening simultaneously. And there are about 1,000 people within APS that work within my division. And so school counseling, school nursing, out of school time. I always say, think about sort of mainstream education, take special education out of that mix, and my division does everything else. And so it's very large, it's very comprehensive. And so some of the things that I'm gonna share with you are things that we're doing, and I'm gonna back up and say, we like the toys. So I know that that's not my part of the presentation, but we like the toys. And so I'm really grateful to be part of this group and part of the committee that you'll hear more about that is working on school safety. I work very closely, my division works very closely with capital, with planning, and also with school police to ensure the safety and well-being of our students. And so some of the things that I wanted to share with you are things that are happening within the division. So we have a whole department that looks at threat assessments and employee wellness. So we do the employee wellness program. So the numbers that you're seeing are from last school year, and I'm going to tell you that even where we are right now, not quite at semester, we're very close to the same numbers, and some of them were actually higher. So we're anticipating, as you all know, we're seeing higher and higher numbers of kids that are experiencing mental health issues and those types of things. So last year we had 909 threat assessments. I don't know how many of your school districts actually do formal threat assessments, but whenever there is a threat by a student to do harm to another student or do harm to a faculty member or do harm to the school, then we implement a threat assessment process for that and figure out what the level of threat is. If it's imminent threat, then we work very closely with the school police department to do that. We actually have a third-party contractor, Southwest Family Guidance, which is a mental health provider that goes out and helps us assess the threat to the school so that hopefully we won't have an incident. Suicide assessments, and people look at that number and they go, wow, that's a high number. We actually want that number higher. We want that number to be as high as we can get it, because what those are students that have identified that they are thinking about suicide. And so those are the kids that we know about. And then we actually do suicide assessments for them with those students and figure out where they are again on the threat and get them into assistance. Those are the kids that we've saved. That's why we want that number high. It's very emotional because we're experiencing high levels of suicide right now, and it's across the country. But we have one high school in particular where we're seeing clusters happening. We're actually bringing in a national expert. It's not okay. And I think that last night, the one thing that was said that I'm taking back with me, and it may become the name of our program, and that was when we heard from the speaker last night that said, silence is no longer the solution. We cannot be quiet about this anymore. If you know someone, you have to say something, or we can't do anything to stop it. We cannot have deaths by suicide anymore, and that number is going up dramatically across the nation, and unfortunately, New Mexico is leading the nation in youth suicide. We have to do something about it. We have health and wellness teams in our schools. Every one of our schools has a health and wellness team. Many times it's led by the school counselor, in others it's led by someone else. These are students that are referred to health and wellness. This is not the same as the process to get kids into special education. These are kids that we're seeing that need help. It may lead to special education depending on what the health and wellness team sees, but it's not special education. And so we do a lot of referrals out of that team for mental health supports for our kids. We also have school mental health providers in our schools. There's not enough mental health providers across the country. That's something, again, that we as a country have to step up and figure out how we get people back into that profession. We need more mental health providers, especially those that can work with youth. And we bring them right into our schools, and we do referrals so that kids don't have to leave school. We have a couple of interesting things. It's different across the nation because these are state laws where kids can actually, at the age of 14, go in for confidential services for mental health. And that's not true in every state, but that helps because kids can go in and receive services and parents don't have to be notified unless it gets to the point of potential suicide ideation. We have a team called DSMART, which is our district stress management and recovery team. This is the team that gets deployed after an incident occurs. So we have a death of a student, potentially a death of a faculty member. It's when those deaths disrupt the learning process. And so this team goes in and provides support to students, and then we also have a contractor that goes in and provides same-day supports in the school for employees. So employee assistance right there in the school. And that's to get teaching and learning back into place. And this is a high-level team, but it's 100% volunteers in our schools that do that. And last year we had over 30 of those deployments, and we actually deployed our team. Some of you may have heard of the shooting that happened out in Aztec, New Mexico. Our team was the one that deployed out there because we were the only district in the state that had that kind of response. And so we went out there for a week. We sent employees out to Aztec for a week to help them. So within my division, as I said, it's very large. We have counseling, we have nursing, we have the employee assistance program, we have out of school time, we have a program that's called Coordinated School Health that looks at lots of health issues of kids, student wellness, some of the other interventions, attendance. I was speaking with some people at lunch today. We just got a new attendance law in place, and hopefully this is going to help stop that school to prison pipeline because we're no longer going to be able to just suspend kids and turn our backs on them. If kids are suspended from schools in this new law, it counts as chronic absenteeism, and schools are going to have to do intervention plans on how they're going to bring those kids back in and keep them there. Because the research shows that once a kid has been suspended for 2 to 3 times, they're not coming back, and most likely they're going to end up in prison. So those are some of the programs that we have. We have drug intervention counselors in all of our high schools that also serve our middle schools and feeder patterns. And all of these are things that we've put into place. It's not on the list, but we just put in 2 years ago what's called behavior redirectors in all of our elementary schools. And these are that when there's an incident in a classroom that is really disruptive, the teacher can send them to the behavior redirector. It's a brief intervention. The behavior redirector works with the kid to figure out, it's a part of restorative practices. Gets the kid back into class, and the kid begins to realize what harm they've done. We're implementing restorative practices. We just hired 6 months ago. We added a new department in my division for school climate. And under that department is bullying prevention, restorative practices, suicide prevention. And so we're looking at all of these things, but we don't do this in isolation. We work very closely with what needs to happen. One of the things that's not on the slide, and I heard it from another presenter, is our school-based health centers. And this is a huge capital and a huge facility issue because you can't have a school-based health center unless you have the right room in a school to do it. It's not the nurse's office. It doesn't meet the code. School-based health centers are basically a health clinic within a school. And so there has to be special build-out for school-based health centers. APS is beginning to look at any new construction. Should we be placing a school-based health center in any new construction that we're doing, any new buildings that we're doing, so that if we can get the providers out there into that school, we've got the capital layout already there. And I'm going to tell you that if you build it, they will come. And there isn't, I've been doing this for many, many years. I've been back in APS for 8 years, and I've been doing this from the state level. And at that time, at the state level, you talk to principals, nobody wanted a school-based health center. There was so much fear that, oh my gosh, they're going to talk about sex. They're going to hand out condoms. That was all anybody could think of when they heard the word school-based health centers. The number one reason kids go to our school-based health center is for mental health supports. The second reason kids go to our school-based health center is for dental supports. So it's not just about going so that they can get a handful of condoms. That's not what it's about. And now I don't have a principal in Albuquerque Public Schools that doesn't want a school-based health center in their school. They've realized the benefit of having a behavioral health specialist on their campus that kids can go to, that we can refer to. And school-based health centers is one of the places that can happen very easily. And they're not APS employees, so we don't have to worry about the difference between HIPAA and FERPA and all of that nonsense that goes on between those two federal laws. So there's lots of stuff, and if I don't partner with these people that are up here with me to make this happen, then we can't have those services in our schools for our kids. And mental health is such a big issue when we're talking about school safety.
Thank you, Dr. Muir. So you can see, before we go into what we implement, what we buy, what methodologies we use, we really have to look into the context and the whole kind of universe of what we're dealing with. This is what we're dealing with. We're dealing with kids, we're dealing with families, and we're dealing with them where they are mentally, health-wise, and emotionally. And so with that, we very quickly realized that we created something called the Integrated Security System Project. And in this project, let me see if I can work this. This project basically meant the standardization, alignment, coordination, and consolidation of systems, security systems, within our district with 142 schools. Now, this system meant that a lot of different departments, a lot of different specialities have to touch this. Obviously, there's the planning and the long-term kind of financing of what we're going to need. Then there's a construction and design of whatever it is that we're going to implement it. And once you build and design and build what you need, then you have to maintain it. So our maintenance and operations are left with whatever structures or whatever tools that we put into place, and they have to make them work sometimes for 30 years. And so they have to be at the table. And then there's obviously IT. Just like in the past, when maintenance and operations and all the infrastructure is essential in how you run any operations, increasingly over the last decade and a half for education, informational technology is as important, if not more important in many ways when it comes to running all these systems. Whatever you run, whether it's cameras, whether it's IP systems, they have to come in through some kind of fiber, they have to be maintained. What we're doing here right now has to run over wireless, has to run over an IP system. And so basically we had to integrate fire, burglar alarms, security cameras, police radio, police dispatch, and card access. All that stuff had to be brought together once we knew what we needed to do. And basically in this ISP, what kind of infrastructure are you going to run? What kind of standardization are you going to run? We found like the legislature would donate cameras, would donate systems, and those systems couldn't talk to each other. You'd have whole schools that have systems that are digital, and last year's systems were analog. They can't talk to each other. So we had to go through, in the last 5 years, what we call a rip and replace, because all the analog systems that had been bought were either redundant or could not be dealt with in an integrated kind of way. So from a design perspective, Karen, you want to add a little bit to that?
Well, I just think that the key here is, and I think what we're trying to say is that everything needs to talk to each other, so it has to be a really coordinated effort. And we could just as easily have maintenance and operations up here with us, we could have IT with us, but every single piece of equipment that we buy has to be able to be integrated with everything else, and it has to be visible at our police command center. So it's all about the coordination, I think.
So one of the main things we did, and we went to our voters to do this, we went and designed and currently constructing what is called an integrated police command center. The integrated police command center is what is going to be running all the hardware. It's also integrated with Homeland Security, FBI, Sheriff's Department, and the local major police department, plus all the other 13 jurisdictions that we work under. So it's been a major undertaking that's taken not only, this is like the 4th year we are working through this process, but we learn as we go along. And we have put in quite a bit. We have made some mistakes, but in working together with maintenance and operations and all the other operational divisions, we actually do something called the Security Assessment and Implementation Committee, where all these people, we meet every 2 weeks. And we have APS Police, Master Plan, Facilities Design, Maintenance Operations, Instructional Technology, Risk Management, Student and Family Police support, and we meet every 2 weeks, not only with an agenda of implementing what needs to be implemented, but to talk about any other problems and to liaise with any other issues that we need to deal with. Karen, you want to add to that?
No, just again, it's all about the collaboration and coordination. You need every single person at the table, and actually with regard to security, it impacts almost every single person in your school district. So you need to get them all at the table talking on a regular basis.
And in talking to each other, when we have, like, John Dufay's not up here, but he's down there, you have M&O that has all the workmen and all the tradespeople who are dealing with the schools every day. We have school police that's dealing with the security perspective of it. We have the boots on the ground that come in and tell us what's going on, and also kind of come up with how do we readjust. Right now we've put in, I think, over $7 million of cameras. We have a plan. We did a total assessment of what we needed district-wise. And when we got to what we needed as a basic package for each school, we came up with 4 major things. Obviously, there was the perimeter fencing, we had the cameras, we had the door lock system, and then we are implementing security vestibules for every school. Now, all those things have to be put in a certain way. When you have schools that range in age from 3 years old to some schools that are 60 years old, some of the schools that are 60 years old may not lend themselves to having a security vestibule and one point of ingress and egress. We have board members in the community who want community schools, but all of a sudden we're putting in perimeter fencing. You can't just walk into a school. So there's all those issues that we have to deal with all the time. We also have site managers, principals who want us to sometimes put cameras in places that have nothing to do with security. We call it administration through camera. They're like, I got an employee over here who's sleeping or shirking work, or I want to watch this area where We think kids are smoking marijuana. You know, there's all those issues. And so we have to tell them from an assessment point of view, from a capital point of view, and from a police point of view, we need to put cameras in certain areas. We've had teachers grieve us and the union grieve us about, I'm gym teacher, I can't put camera in the gym. That's not fair. And we have to tell them, hey, it's a common area, it's a public area. There has to be a camera over there. And what is it that you're doing that you don't want people to see anyway? So we have to deal with all those issues comprehensively in terms of going there. So with that, I'll let Lieutenant Marez talk about our police department, what we do, and why we went from actual, what we call lockdown, to the Alice process in terms of what we're talking about. Just really quickly, you look at this picture and you see one of the protocols and one of the exercises, and he'll talk about Alice. And we'll talk about, can you scroll down a little bit? In terms of, if you remember the examples of all shelter in place and security, what our security people tell us, this is one of the reasons why there's been such high casualty rates in a lot of the schools, because that's like fish in a barrel. When they went and did that, then whoever was the perpetrator or the gunman had carte blanche, would actually come up and ask for people's names and shoot them. So with that, I'll let the lieutenant talk about this.
Good afternoon. Aren't like after lunch classes the best ones? So everybody awake? Just out of curiosity, who has law enforcement departments within your school district that are here? Okay, several. New Mexico, Albuquerque is the only school district that has their own police department. So just a quick overview of what we are. Our department consists of 59 police officers, sworn and commissioned. That includes our chief, deputy chief, lieutenants, all the way down to our patrolmen and detectives. We have 71 civilian CSAs, or campus service aides. They assist with security on our campus sites, or all of our building sites. We also have our own dispatch center with 9 dispatchers. We have our own evidence unit who we process our own evidence. Not DNA stuff like that. That stuff has to be sent out to a lab. But we control our own evidence. We have Mr. Casito said, our own alarm techs. They do card access, alarms, cameras. We have, I think, 4,800 cameras.
It's up to 6,000.
Up to 6,000 cameras now. Then we also have, we are in charge of our own background and fingerprinting division within the police department, and then we have our own three office personnel that assist with us. The boss said, we liaison with many different jurisdictions within the area that we cover, which is huge for only a 59-man police department. But we have the city, we have the county, we have the nations that are around us. So we have schools in every one of those districts that we are in charge of. Our training consists, basically, we are, just like any police department in the United States, we are required by the Law Enforcement Academy in New Mexico to have same training that any other law enforcement officer has throughout the state. I'm a retired lieutenant from the Albuquerque Police Department, and we train the exact same way as far as our firearms training goes, our mental health training, all those things that we are required to have by state or even federal law sometimes, we have that same, that we follow that same training. I'll keep this kind of quick because I know we're running short on time. Some of the things we've been implementing to assist our students and our staff, Chris talked about it a minute ago, restorative justice or restorative practices. Basically all that is we looked at the amount of arrests that we were making as a law enforcement agency, and we felt that it's counterproductive. If you get a kid out of school, it's counterproductive. If we're suspending them, it's counterproductive. So what we're doing with restorative justice or restorative practices, excuse me, is it just gives us, the officers and staff different options to keep those students in class. They can do community service on campus, scraping gum off the floor, whatever needs to be done around the school, but they're still in school. That's the main thing. But the biggest thing that I was tasked to oversee 2 years ago was our active shooter response training, which we did a lot of studying on, and basically we felt that ALICE was the best approach that we will implement. Basically, all ALICE is it's an acronym, stands for Alert, Lockdown, Inform, Counter, and Evacuate. You guys saw that on the slide before. It's a proactive approach. We don't even use the terminology lockdown in APS anymore. Does anybody know where lockdown came from? It's a prison term, all right? We don't use that terminology anymore. What we utilize now is ALICE. And basically what ALICE does, it's proactive. We teach students and staff how to utilize the tools that are around them, how to utilize technology, how to utilize their human abilities to help save their lives. We no longer want them locking themselves in a room and waiting in a corner for law enforcement to show up, because we realized, unfortunately, we're not first responders anymore. And a lot of these times, these incidents are over by the time we get there. So we're empowering our students, we're empowering our employees now to actually do something. Things that we emphasize are the options that they have is if the bad guy is close to their proximity, close to their area, what we want them to do is barricade and fortify themselves in a location to secure that situation, to secure that area. And if they're not, we want them off campus. We want them evacuating. I don't care where they go, we just want them away from the bad guy. That's something that we've been training now this is our second year training. We train, the way we implemented it was there were several of us that went to the certification class. We came back, we trained all our SROs. We have 13 high schools, we have 13 officers in each one of those high schools. We utilize a train the trainer kind of concept. We train those staff, those officers will train the staff in their schools, and then the staff will train their students. It's been a pretty effective way to get that information down to where it needs to be. Each school is different, so we wanted to make sure that the officer at that school was able to train those individuals and identify areas of concern for that specific school. I think that's it, because do you want to?
Yeah.
You guys time for questions?
Yeah, so we'll swing back, and if you have any questions for the lieutenant, we'll get to that. So lastly, I'll let Karen talk about the hardware standards and the architectural standards, because starting with family and emotional wellness, and then the actual tactics that law enforcement uses, we have to have structures, hardware, and software that supports this. And when you have 15 million square feet, 143 schools, and another 15 administrative facilities, you have to do this in a comprehensive way that you can sustain, maintain, and then have everybody, depending on what methodologies you use, people are kind of using the same kind of tactics to deal with this issue, which is not a fun issue to deal with. We'll start with, I guess, the vestibules.
Yeah, so working closely with the SAC committee, which is that comprehensive committee that we've set up, we started talking about what do we need physically at every campus. And as Casito reiterated before, we talked about fencing, we talked about cameras, we talked about secure vestibules. And so we started taking a closer look at a secure vestibule, keeping in mind that the average age of our school is about 40 years old, and one size does not fit all. So everyone is kind of a unique solution, but we did come up with what we like to call our standard design, and this would be the ideal. Sometimes we can't do the things that you're seeing on this sketch, but we would like to have at every school a secure place where the front office can make the decision of whether or not they want you in their school, right? So from the very beginning. But in order to do that, we had to talk about single points of entry. And our campuses are very porous. We have a lot of joint use facilities. We share a lot of our parks with the city of Albuquerque, have to give the public access before and after school. We just have very porous campuses. So we had to look at this comprehensively, starting with the exterior perimeter. I'm going to kind of skip around because I know we have pictures of fencing later, but basically we wanted to take a look at the exterior fencing and try to make that as solid as we could. Of course, every time you have a pipe gate, you don't have a secure fence anymore, right? Anybody could just walk right over that. So we started taking a look at that. We started taking a look at how can we assure that we have a single point of access. We started looking at interior fencing, so maybe building to building connected with fences. And in an effort to get that, we also started looking at exit-only doors, taking hardware completely off the outside of doors and having them have to, if they get outside there, they're gonna have to walk around the front. We also, kind of our mantra on the committee is that security is not convenient. And so people are finding themselves a little inconvenienced now. But we've got that and combining it with the fact that we now have total integration with our cameras, our fire alarms, our intrusion alarms. All of that allows for us to have secure areas or secure campuses for our students. And I do want to leave time for questions because I know you probably want to have
Please scroll down.
questions for these guys. But I think the important takeaways are that you need to have everything talking to each other, which means that you're not going to buy equipment that is sole sourced for things. Yeah, Kazito's kind of going through the secure vestibule. This was the first one that we did, and of course you can see that this one has a lot of visual for the secure vestibule, but it doesn't, not all our schools are able to do that. Sometimes we've even had to do them remotely. But that little camera and button call are kind of the thing that triggered the cameras for the front reception office. Card swipes everywhere. All of our faculty have card swipes. Our students typically do not, but a faculty person can get right through and get in anywhere they need to. Do you want to keep scrolling down?
Yeah, please keep scrolling.
Okay. So this is the interior of the first secure vestibule we did. Took a lot of coordination with ADA and the doors opening and having the doors stay shut at the same time. And then you can see in there the reception desk, which can talk to and visually see who's in the secure vestibule as well as when they are right outside the secure vestibule. There's also a security camera in there that you can't see too well in that photograph. And then I need to do a shout out to our maintenance and operations people. Kudos to John Dufay's staff. They replaced, this is an old slide, they've replaced every single one of our classroom locks so that now the teachers can lock the classroom from either the inside or the outside. So before we had the old-fashioned locks where you had to come outside into the corridor to lock your classroom if you were doing a shelter-in-place, but now they can lock them from inside.
Yeah, 6,500 locks. All done in overtime at night, so.
Yep, it was a good job. This is an example of installing panic hardware so that kids can get out. With the ALICE training, they have to be able to get out and run. So we've got panic hardware on a lot of our fences and gates. And I believe the next slide down is an example of perimeter fencing, like people haven't seen a lot of that. And our standard is 6-foot fencing. And then this is getting back to the coordination of all of the equipment and the security cameras, having a single point of monitoring, which is the APS Police Command Center. They monitor and control all of our cameras, and it's a single point of monitoring was another thing, because we kind of have had different things monitor different pieces for a while, but we're getting everything coordinated now.
So with that, we have other comprehensive tools, like, for example, we can give access, if there's a SWAT situations, we can give limited access to just that facility to either the police or sheriff's department. We can also give them online, real-time access to our building plans. The board and the public is very specific about not having their schools monitored at all times. So we have a system where they just get this on an as-needed and emergency basis. And this happens for fire and other emergency services. So we're still working on these issues. On your tables, you have a QR code and a little web link. So if you can, with your phone, you can go right onto that QR code and you can find this presentation and you can deep dive in and really look at what we're doing. And we'll be changing this presentation in real time as we add more things and as we get better at it. So with that, we are open for questions. Go ahead.
I can't see any.
My question is, have you implemented all of these for all the schools, or you're in the process of completing that?
So what we've done is, we looked at low-hanging fruit first. There's a certain level, basic level of hardware we need to put in every school right now. So every single door that has kids behind it has a lock, has one of those lock systems. Every single school has some level of connectivity when it comes to digital cameras. Things such as the fences and the vestibules, it's a work in progress. So that's where we have that committee where we meet every 2 weeks, not only to look at the progress, to look at the budget, and then report back to the board and the leadership, and then eventually, because our long range kind of resolution on this was the initial part to put what we're talking about here would cost about 30 million. So we're about 17 million into that. That's just implementing hardware, and we shall be needing more resources. You know, the more cameras you put in, kids chuck stones at them, people throw stuff at it, the weather. So it's a work in progress, and that's why we created this whole comprehensive kind of process.
And if this was done in-house, or have you been utilizing professional services to assist you in this?
Oh yeah, there's been vendors, but we had to standardize everything. Just like Ms. Alarid said, we had some vendors who wanted to sole source kind of software and hardware, and we can't have that because we have things of different generations, we have different levels of hardware, so it had to be open source, and everything that we do has to be comprehensive so that we can work together not only with us, but with other law enforcement agencies. Right now, we are in the process of procuring a CAD system and a radio system that will work with all the law enforcement agencies. Thank you.
Hi, Pat Hamilton from Adams 12 5-star schools, just up the highway from you guys in Denver, Colorado. I'm wondering how you are addressing the national conversation now that is starting to happen around security drills causing traumatic effects or being traumatizing to students. It's something that we are having a lot of conversation with in our district, with our community. I just wanted to know how you all are doing that.
So the way we address that is we teach our kids from a very young age to be aware of a lot of different things. from fire drills to stranger danger to, ditch awareness is huge in our area. And I think there's a way that it can be taught. Now, when we conduct a drill, it is controlled. It's not chaotic like the real situation would be, but just same as fire drills. Whenever we do a fire drill, it takes about 2 to 3 minutes for our students to get out of the school completely and safely. If that school is really on fire, though, it'd probably take a little bit less time, right? So when we conduct a drill, again, it's controlled. Everybody's made aware of the drill ahead of time. Staff, students, even parents, they're all made aware of the drill. Everybody has to be trained on the technique prior to doing that. And then, we have officers that are there, and we just kind of have them go through that drill just same as we would a fire drill. They walk out controlled, they walk out calmly, just to kind of get that feel, get that muscle memory going. And then, if anybody chooses to opt out of that drill, they also have that option to do so. And that's one of the reasons we inform parents as well. I can tell you, I've trained this Alice protocol for 2 years now. I've had a handful of parents that have talked to me about their concerns, and after meeting with them and explaining to them what Alice is and how we can implement it and how successful it is of a protocol, I've had zero returns as far as any parents or even staff not wanting to go along with it.
And I'm going to add real quickly to that, because this is just sort of now new, where kids are sort of being traumatized. And so I've been having a lot of discussions with our chief of police, and we're going to be giving our school counselors a heads up so that they know that it's coming and they are more aware, and we'll probably have, you don't know this yet, you coming to our counseling meetings and talking to the school counselors about what it is and what to look for in student distress on it. Some of you are as old as me in the room, and you remember that the thing was to get underneath the desk, put your head between your legs, and say goodbye to your butt, because there was no other thing you could do at that point. And so this is way different. And back then, that was traumatic for us as kids. So this is even more traumatic, but we're looking at ways to sort of minimize that trauma. We do not do real scenes and
live fire,
you actually, there was one in the paper where they actually held the gun to this teacher's head as one of the drills, and it's like that put everybody into craze.
We didn't do that.
We don't do that in APS. So, but we are looking at ways to minimize the process and to make sure that our school counselors are well aware what's going on, and if we need to, we'll see kids if they're traumatized by it.
I should have a question right back here.
I have 2 questions. First of all, the Alice program, how does that work with kindergarten and first graders if you're going to do the runway, no other option?
So, well, there is options, and that's what's great about Alice. So if we have younger kids that we are not able to get them off safely, we'll teach those staff to the barricade and fortify technique. Okay, but I'm going to tell you, reality is, this is what I teach our teachers of our younger students. If you can just get your students to run around in a circle, the chances of them getting struck by a bullet is extremely low. Okay, I don't know how many of you in here shoot or hunt, but hitting a moving target is extremely hard. Okay, what we were doing in the past is putting everybody in the corner and then they shooting fish in a barrel, right? So we're not doing that anymore. So if we can barricade and fortify, then same thing goes. I want them running. They are empowering our students and empowering our staff is one way that we can address that fear. But still, we want them moving. If they are near the bad guy, I want them away. I've taught my kids this from the times that they were small. You just need to be away from the bad guy. So we do high fight and run, and that's what we used to teach in the past. I'm not a fan of it. I'm not a fan of hiding. I think moving or securing yourself in a secure area are your best options. Hiding from a bad guy is not gonna keep you as safe. Your best options are going to be either to evacuate or to barricade and fortify.
Second question, do you do much with the public school capital outlay committee, PSCOC?
Yes,
Okay.
we do. Although there's a quirk in New Mexico law in that And what he's talking about is that capital in New Mexico, the way it flows down is that for Albuquerque, 95% of our capital comes from the local taxpayer, local jurisdiction. But you are also eligible for state capital outlay. And that's based on several factors. But to cut a long story short, we applied for $16 million specifically for security. We got zero because if your local legislators bring down pork, the other white meat, basically what happens is it has been deemed as inequitable for school districts that don't have powerful legislators or a lot of legislators. And so through some kind of formula, you get something called an offset. So we used to work with the public school capital outlay in Santa Fe. We don't anymore, not because we don't want to, but because we don't get any money from them. So that's the answer for that.
We have a question in the back of the room here.
Yes, I'm Tom Inkton. I'm El Paso, Texas, Chief Operation Officer. Lieutenant, you mentioned that you have your own police force.
Yes, sir.
We do too. We have, don't tell me, I don't supervise that, but you mentioned, I believe, that you have police officers at your high school.
Yes, sir.
We are in the process of we've got officers at our high school and we're at our middle school, and we're in the process of transitioning our security guards to have officers in our elementary school.
Wow.
In Milwaukee, about a month ago, I posed that question to a committee up there and almost got ran out of the building because they said that that's going to traumatize the kids and everything. I was just wanting your opinion. We're next door neighbors, and I think we posed it to our parents and our students, and they're in favor of it. Some of these other districts throughout the country may not think that's right, but that's what we're doing. We're doing all your other security measures.
Good.
We're probably ahead of y'all on a lot of those things.
Yeah.
But as far as officers in schools, what is your opinion?
So I'll tell you, if you want to cause havoc in the United States, you do something at an elementary school. Do something bad at an elementary school. Sandy Hook was a prime example. The way that we utilize our officers, they're not just there for security. They're there as a resource, as a role model. And I think that if we can start that at that age, we'd have a lot less issues when we're dealing with them when they're in high school and middle school and high school. Unfortunately, we have, I'm sure everybody's in here either done it or said it, having their little kid misbehaving behavior, I'm going to have that police officer take you. We run into that a lot during the day. And unfortunately, we even have some of our staff call us and say, hey, we have a 6th grader or a 6-year-old who's misbehaving. Can you send an armed police officer? I'm not going to do that. That's not their role. I think having them there, though, is it's an important part of just this whole safety protocol from the time, because we're going to have them from the time that they're 5 years old in kindergarten till 12 years old, or 12th grade and 18 years old. So if we can establish that relationship, a positive relationship between law enforcement and students at that young age, I think it can only benefit us.
So I'm going to add a little bit to that, because one of the things you can do to help sell it is what you're going to do with your officers and how you're going to train them. Our school police officers are trained in how to work with youth, and that's different than like a city police officer coming in where they're there to mitigate a situation. And we're in the process right now of training all of our school police officers in youth mental health first aid. They're all getting training in restorative practices and helping the schools through those kinds of things. So if they're seen not just as someone that's going to hold the law, but someone that's a resource in the school, and our goal in elementary schools is that they find a police officer as someone that they can go to for help. Not someone that's going to come and arrest them. so that when they're out on the streets and if they're experiencing something, someone's trying to grab a kid and they see a police officer over there, they feel comfortable going to that police officer because they're not afraid that that police officer is going to arrest them. And so it's changing the climate around what school police do in our schools.
And it's a different role. Our sheriff's department and our city police police department understand this, and their role is different. Their role in mitigating issues is very different from what our school police officers have to do with dealing with kids. It just so happens that a lot of our police officers are veterans either of the Albuquerque Police Department or the sheriff's organization. So they've been there on the street, and they do understand. They're very experienced, and it complements itself.
Well, unfortunately, we're out of time, but I really want to give you guys, a super round of applause. Amazing job doing this. Amazing work that you're doing in your district, and thank you for taking the time to share it here. Kudos to what you guys are doing, and of course, you're saying that link will be continually updated so people can see as you guys doing it. So again, thank you so much.